Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson and in this video we are going to be starting our look through of the Dark Souls 2 Designworks art book. So this is book 2 in the 3-piece set that I have of Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3. So we've already covered Dark Souls 1. So I thought we should move on to Dark Souls 2 next. However, the Dark Souls 2 book is about twice the size of the Dark Souls 1 book. So Dark Souls 2 is notorious for being the weakest of all of the From Software games. And I completely agree with that. It is objectively the worst out of all the games. However, I adore Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 was my entry point into the series. It was the first ever From Software game that I ever played. So because of that, I adore the game. It has so many flaws. It is easily the weakest game. I fully admit that and completely understand it. Its mechanics are bad. Its hitboxes are bad, its graphics are horrendous. However, I still love the game entirely. Now, last thing before we get into this, I'm not sure if this is covering the original Dark Souls 2 or the Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. I have only played Scholar of the First Sin. Actually, no, that's a lie. I apologize. I have played Dark Souls 2, the original, but I only made it to about, I only beat maybe about 4 bosses, and then I kind of lost interest, and then played Scholar of the First Sin, and completely fell in love. So I'm not sure which version this covers, but we are going to go ahead and get into it nonetheless. So with the intro out of the way, let's just dive right in. And I did have a brief little look through this. Some of the environment pages are very, very dark, so I will do my best to make them visible, but if not, I will describe them thoroughly. So let's get started. So we start off here with a picture of a knight holding a sword with a shield and what looks like the crestfallen knight that we find in Majula. I'm not sure if this is meant to be Majula. It doesn't look like it, but the way this guy is sitting makes it look like it. And I just realized I'm already made a mistake. This is the Pursuer boss, one of the coolest looking bosses in the game. I can tell by the glowing red slit in his visor, but we will talk about more about him later on. So this is a double spread. This was a image featured in one of the trailers for the game. It essentially showed this knight wearing the Faram set, fighting a dragon. I believe the dragon ended up winning, but it's still a very cool picture. Everyone likes pictures of knights fighting dragons. The Faram set that this knight is wearing is essentially the box art armor set for this. So in the same way the Elite Knight set was the kind of box art set for Dark Souls 1, this is the set for Dark Souls 2. So this looks like where we actually start the game, or at least somewhere near it. I'm not sure where this is. It kind of looks again like Majula, just based on the sun and everything, but I don't think it is because there's stuff on fire over here, so I think this is just a general environment. So here we have another Faram knight fallen to his knees. He has his longsword kind of on one shoulder. Looks very defeated. So here we have King Vendrick, who is the king and monarch of the kingdom of Drangleic. Drangleic is the kingdom and the essentially the whole area that we explore in Dark Souls 2. In Dark Souls 1, it was Lordran. In Dark Souls 2, it is Drangleic. And it looks like the king here has gone hollow in this picture. Again, we'll talk about that more later. So this is chapter 1, concept art. So again, I'm not going to be reading any of the design notes. I am just going to be doing or reading stuff related to lore. So we start off here with the interior of the house that we come across in Things Betwixt, where we meet all of the old crone firekeepers. They are the ones who essentially give us some human effigies, and they they also are where we create our character and choose our class and stats and stuff. I'm not sure if this is where we get our Estus Flask or not, but this is essentially where the game officially begins. Here we have a picture of Majula. It doesn't look as happy as it actually does look in the real game. And I'm assuming someone lives here. And then this is Majula. This is the path that leads us down to the Forest of Fallen Giants. Speaking of which, here is a giant that is stuck into a tree. Whether or not the tree has grown around him, whether or not he has turned into a tree. But yeah, so the kingdom of Drangleic went to war with the giants across the sea. However, the giants across the sea did not take it lightly, and they invaded Drangleic. And despite Drangleic winning the war, it was not without a heavy price. So here we have a ballista. This is found in the Forest of Fallen Giants. This can be used during the Pursuer boss fight. If you time it right, if you're able to parry him and then run to the ballista and shoot, you can take out about 3/4 of his health right away. This is the Cathedral of the Blue. So this is one of the bosses that we find in the area called Hyde's Tower of Flame. When you get to the largest room, if you go left instead of right, you will come across this building. I'm trying not to talk too much about bosses or anything just until we actually get to them. So if I'm just talking about the areas, that's kind of it. So this is Hyde's Tower of Flame here. As you can see, it's very bright and everything opposed to being very gloomy. So this is the main building here that we enter, where we find some massive knights along with some Hyde knights. The Hyde knights are the best looking armor in all of Dark Souls, and I will defend that to the death. So if we head to the left here across this path, we wind up in the Cathedral of the Blue after we defeat a Drake. I believe the Drake is only in Scholar of the First Sin. And if we head over here, we fight another boss, which leads us down to an area called No Man's Wharf. Speaking of which, this is not a ship that is in No Man's Wharf, which is a ship that holds a boss underneath and can transport us to another location called the Lost Bastille, but this is not the only way that you can reach the Lost Bastille. So here we have the Iron Keep. So, sorry, let me zoom out a little bit. So here we have the Iron Keep here. We have one of the Bull Braziers, and we have one of the Pharaoh's Contraptions. Pharaoh's Contraptions are almost like optional little doors you can access that can either give you secrets or poison you or instantly kill you. There are items called Pharaoh's Lockstones which you can use, and you find these kind of holes all over the place, and inserting them, you never know what you're gonna get. It might be a really good weapon or a piece of armor, it might be nothing, it might be a dead end, it might be enemies, or it might be something that instantly poisons you. So it's a very risk-reward kind of situation. So here we have the Brightstone Cove chapel. That is the exterior of it. Looks very, very nice, especially with the nice sunlight coming in. It's cool. It looks like it's almost built partly into the rock face, which is a really cool idea for a cathedral. And then here is the Brightstone Cove Cathedral, the interior. So this is the altar here. I don't know if you guys can see that because it is a very, very dark picture. You know, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. So again, this is Brightstone Cove at, what's it called? Brightstone Cove Sildora, the outside. And then we have the Grave of Saints. I remember this area quite well. This is one of the early designs of it, which is cool. This is the entrance. Yeah. Moving on, so we have the entrance to an area called the Gutter. The Gutter is a location that you find by jumping down the massive hole in Majula. If you survive, first off, you need to get the cat ring from the cat merchant to be able to survive the fall damage. And then once you enter it and go further, you can go down here and yeah. So here we have the Gutter. So this is a very filthy area. It's in one of the underground areas, and it is essentially Blighttown 2.0. Some people say it's better than Blighttown, some people say it's worse. It's better in the fact that it doesn't bring you down to 3 frames per second, but it's worse in the fact that you need a torch to be able to see at all. And you also have all of these statues spitting poison at you. So these are the statues here. The ones on the left, the just plain stone ones, don't do anything. But the green ones spit poison at you, and they poison you really fast. These here are something called a vermin pot. So they're essentially just normal pots, but if you roll into them or break them, you sustain a massive amount of poison. I don't think one will actually fully poison you, but it will bring you extremely close. Here we have the Drangleic Castle, a concept design of us, or one of the areas where we walk through. This looks like the walk up to the fight with the Mirror Knight. Maybe I'm wrong, but just these guys on the side flanking on both the left and the right with the swords looks very familiar to the walkway where we have to go through to get to the Mirror Knight. So here is some more of Drangleic Castle. So this here is the Mirror Knight, and we have a bunch of people here. I'm assuming these are player characters or summons. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people fighting off against the Mirror Knight. Mirror Knight is one of the better bosses in this game. Apart from him being extremely tough, He is actually a PvP boss, so you can join to enter a special covenant, and if you join that covenant, you can be summoned by the knight by jumping out of his mirror. So you can be fighting this guy, and all of a sudden an actual player will hop out and start attacking you. If there's no players to be found, or if you're playing offline, it is just NPC invaders. But this boss fight is really cool. The environment's cool. You know, you're fighting them on a rooftop in the middle of a massive rainstorm. But having someone who is far better at you than the game to jump out and hit you once and kills you can be quite annoying. So here we have two more early designs for Drangleic Castle. Drangleic Castle is kind of, it's not the end game area per se, but it's our objective where we have to reach Drangleic Castle. We're even told at the start by one of the Finger Maidens, or sorry, not Finger Maidens, I have Elden Ring on the mind, by one of the old Fire Keepers, that, you know, will come across the gates to Drangleic Castle without knowing why or how we got there, which is just kind of cool, because it's like that would be how Hollows would see it. You know, they would just kind of wander and eventually find our way to that location. I apologize for saying Finger Maidens. I was looking through my Elden Ring art book that arrived earlier today before I started recording. So I have a lot of Elden Ring stuff on the mind right now, but it won't happen again, I pinky promise. So here we have Drangleic Castle, again another early design. So this is a knight standing on top of a fallen pillar, looking out in the distance at Drangleic Castle. This is a really cool picture. When we find Drangleic Castle in the game, it is nighttime and it is raining, but here we see it during a nice bright sunny day. So it's just cool seeing this castle in concept. The castle from this distance looks like it's very small, but that cannot be further from the truth. It almost dwarfs the castle in Anor Londo. Just in terms of how much space inside there is. So again, this is another early design of the Drangleic Castle. I believe these people are pushing some kind of wheel. Maybe this is like an elevator or something. I'm not quite sure what's actually happening in that picture. So here we have the Drangleic Castle portrait of Queen Nashandra. Queen Nashandra is Queen Vendrick's wife, who came from across the sea. She was the one who convinced the king to go to war with the giants, and it raises a question, like, why would she talk the king into going to war with a race that is seemingly not hostile at all? So kind of suspicious. Here is the king's banner, which looks really cool. It almost looks to me like a demon. These look like horns, you know, 2 eyes, and then a massive red smile. Maybe that's just me. Maybe this is like a Rorschach test of sorts. But yeah, it's a very cool design. This area is universally every single Dark Souls 2 player's favorite location, especially mine. I adore the Shrine of Amana. It's not tedious at all. The enemies are completely fair and not unfair at all. And yeah, it's just all around a great area. So yeah, if you like Shrine of Amana as much as I like it, let me know in the comments, because I absolutely love being stun locked by 5 different mages at the same time. It's so much fun. Next up is the Shrine for Mana, the entrance to it. So this is it here. It looks like we're passing underneath some kind of, gateway that has been overtaken by nature. We have vines on the top here. So this is the Shrine of Amamana Tower. So this is one of the locations that we have to get to. It's near the end of the shrine. This is the Decrepit Gate. So really cool area. I believe this is the gate that we need to open to find King Vendrick. I could be mistaken. This might be a different gate. It has been about 3 years since I played Dark Souls 2. So I'm just going on memory. So if that is a mistake, I genuinely apologize. Next we have the lakeside. So this looks like the cutscene at the start of the game where we are rowing a boat and we pass under a gate and there is a massive whirlpool and our character jumps into it. And when we wake up, we are in the kingdom of Lothric. Where this lake is, or where we were before we entered Lothric, is never explained, but we came to Lothric for some reason. Maybe us hollows, or people who are cursed with being undead are drawn to it. So next up we have Aldia's Keep. So this is a massive research hall filled with all kinds of experiments on different creatures, not just on creatures themselves, but on people that the king's brother, Aldia, has transformed into monstrosities. So you come across loads of different enemies from different locations. It is cool that the fact that you find enemies from all different locations in the game in this singular hallway, it just kind of implies that these creatures that we find in different zones and locations aren't necessarily from there, that they were created by Aldia here and then made their way there, or maybe they escaped. So Aldia is trying to cure the undead curse, but he is very, very ruthless and a very sick man in his studies. So here are some carriages in Aldia's Keep. We can see these kind of rocking and bumping back and forth, meaning that there's something or someone inside trying to get out. And then this is the laboratory bench that we find in his keep as well. So next up we have the Dragon Shrine. So this is one of the late game areas that we come to. So this is a massive shrine to the dragons. We can even find a massive dragon at the very top of this area. There are a couple of very difficult enemies. They're very similar to the enemies we find in Hyde's Tower of Flame, except they are much, much stronger. There are also people who are in dragon form. The Dark Souls 2 dragon form is my personal favorite. It looks more like someone wearing extremely ornate dragon armor as opposed to actually being a dragon. And of course you can transform into it if you would like. One of the cool things about them as you progress through this area is they are non-hostile. They don't attack you, they don't help you, they just stand there and they just watch. However, if you accidentally hit one of them, every single one of them in the vicinity instantly becomes hostile and charges you and will not stop until they are killed. They do not de-aggro, they keep on following you, and they are extremely dangerous. But it's fairly easy to get past them. You just have to essentially not attack them. But it is a really cool area nonetheless. So this is a coffin that we find in Things Betwixt during the tutorial zone. It is guarded by one of the one-eyed ogre creatures, but once we defeat him, he does not respawn. So what does this coffin do? This coffin allows you to change your character's gender. So you can't fully customize their appearance or re-customize their appearance, but if you are playing as a man and you want to become a woman or vice versa, you can go ahead and do that. So what is cool is this is From Software's first iteration of being able to swap how your character looks. I believe it might have been, no, it wasn't possible in Dark Souls 3, but it is possible in Elden Ring. You can completely go and change your appearance for absolutely nothing. Then here we have the Dark Chasm of, the Altar of the Dark Chasm. So really, really cool. This is the Throne of Want. So this is essentially the thing our character is trying to achieve and ascend to become the next person to link the fire. The cutscene at the end of the game, if we choose this ending, we don't actually see us light the fire, but yeah, there is two final options or final endings. Once we defeat the final boss, I'm not saying who or what that is just yet, but once we defeat the final boss, we can either walk forward and kind of get the keep the fire alive ending, or we can walk out of the fog door that we came in and let the fire fade out. So it's up to you, really. Unlike Dark Souls 1, which gave you a bunch of different NPCs giving their various takes on what's good and what's right, you know, like Dark Seeker Karth or Frent, there's no NPC saying that, you know, hey, maybe it's a good idea to let the flame die in this game. So it's completely up to you, which kind of sucks. I wish there was some NPCs that suggested maybe not relinking the fire, but that's just me. Like I said, this game was handled by the B team in FromSoft. Miyazaki-san did not have basically anything to do with this game or its development. He was definitely involved, don't get me wrong, but while this game was being made, he was busy with Bloodborne, so this kind of fell to the B team of From Software. So next up we have the Throne of Want. So this is the doors that we need to go through to enter the throne, and then this is the throne here itself. So it looks extremely uncomfortable. I would not want to sit in that, even if it meant that I would become king. If I had to sit in that thing for eternity, I'll just pass. So next up we have boss design illustrations, and this movement is closer to me just so I can see it. So it says, this section features illustrations of all of the area bosses, particularly difficult enemies that appear throughout the game's locations. The previous title focused on demons and dragons, and added to their ranks in this game are the royal warriors and giants who have their origins in the war that consumed the kingdom of Drangleic. These bosses were designed to make an intense impression on the player first encounter with them. So, some of them, that is very true, others, that is very not true. So, first up, we have the Last Giant. So, the Last Giant is meant to be the first boss that you fight. He is the final boss in the, sorry, not, the final boss. He is one of the bosses, that you can fight in the Forest of Fallen Giants. He is, like it said, he's the last living giant, and he is essentially imprisoned. He has this massive tree trunk stuck through his abdomen. When we see him, he's like tied up, and he has all of these swords sticking out of him. When we see him, though, he absolutely goes mental when he sees us, which is weird. And if you've played Dark Souls 2, you know that we do some of the flashbacks where we go back in time and fight the giants during the Giant War. And one of the enemies that we fight that is a boss is the Giant King. So he's like the king of the giants. And we, of course, end up defeating him. So this is actually the king of the giants many, many years later. So he went from being the king to a prisoner living in agony with no end. So when he sees us, his hatred is absolutely justified. This is the Pursuer. So it says here, the Pursuer, hounding the player at every turn, this wandering presence has amassed a great deal of grudges and curses. It appears to confront the player time and time again, even after being defeated, and its tenacity is palpable in every single encounter. I added the swirling embodiments of malice into struggle to burst forth from the armor in order to lend the Pursuer grotesque and spiritual air. Apologies, that text is tiny. I could barely see it. So this is the Pursuer. He is one of the bosses that we fight in the Forest of Fallen Giants, and I believe he is actually the main boss that we do need to kill. The Last Giant, we do not need to kill him. I don't think so. But we do need to kill the Pursuer. So the Pursuer is actually quite easy. However, he is one of my favorite bosses in Dark Souls 2 just because of how cool he looks. He's this massive knight. He's almost reminds me of like the Mountain from Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire. His chest piece is this massive piece of metal with like all of these screaming souls and faces coming out of it. He also on his back has a small arsenal of bows, arrows, axes, maces, great axes, and all that. So he wields his sword, which can curse you, and being cursed in Dark Souls 2 is not good. And his shield. The hardest thing about fighting the Pursuer is his hitbox, and I don't mean his hitbox in terms of us hitting him. I mean his hitbox in terms of his attacks will strike in the completely wrong area code to where you are standing, and you will be teleported and impaled on his sword, which is bullshit. But other than that, he's pretty easy to defeat. He's very easy to parry, and as I mentioned earlier with the ballista, all you have to do is parry him in front of the ballista, run over to it, shoot him, and then hit him like 3 times and he dies. But as it says earlier, this is where we fight him as a boss. We fight him many more times throughout the game just as a regular enemy, because he was charged by King Vendrick to essentially hunt down and eradicate any and all undead, because that was Vendrick's solution, was either to kill all of the undead, or not kill them all, but essentially have this guy pursue them day and night so they never know peace, or ship them off to the lost Bastille. This enemy here is the Dragon Rider. So this is one of the bosses that we fight in Hyde's Tower of Flame. This is what the boss we fight if we go to the right instead of the left. He is a massive knight in this immaculate red armor with this really cool halberd looking weapon, as well as this shield. I believe we can actually get his armor. It's so cool. Again, we fight him fairly early on, so as cool as he looks, he is fairly simple to defeat. He's also easy to cheese, but I won't say what the cheese method because that's cheating. We fight him again later on in Drangleic Castle. We fight two of him. One with the same loadout, with the sword, with the halberd and shield, and the other one is up on a little ledge with the great bow, and he only drops down once we defeat his friend. And this is him from the back here. This is the Flexile Sentry. So this is the boss that is located in the hold of the ship in No Man's Wharf, which I was talking about. He is not a very difficult boss, but he's not super easy either. What's cool about him is that you can't circle strafe this boss because there are two of him, and each one of them has two weapons, so you can't backstab him, you can't sneak around him, because if you sneak around one side, the guy on his back will just hit you, and vice versa. So you have to be careful. He hits you with a flurry of attacks using these spiked maces and machetes. One of them uses two like machete type weapons, while the other uses two spiked mace looking things. This is them close up, but yeah, they are, like I said, not super difficult, but not a cakewalk either. So these guys here are the Suspicious Shadows. So these guys almost look like assassins. They look really, really cool. They have these spiked gauntlet hands with claws on them. They have these slender rapiers and kind of daggers. They have this really cool looking mask. It almost looks like a warrior version of a plague doctor's mask. And they have all of their weapons on their back, and they also have throwing knives. So these guys are really cool. They're quite weak, but they are fast and very deadly if you do not dispatch them quickly. Here is the Ruin Sentinels. So the Ruin Sentinels are a boss in the Lost Bastille. They are a 3-on-1 fight, which isn't really fair. However, these guys are extremely weak, so there's an option to drop down. Two of them are located on the ground floor, but there is a little ledge where one of them is standing alone. So the best strat is to kill the one that's alone first, and then jump down and take care of the two, or let one of them jump up and take them out from there. So this is more of a battle of attrition. You just have to kind of poke away at them and stay patient. If you go in and go like absolutely mental, they will stun lock you to death and kill you. Not the best fight in the game. From Software has definitely done multi-enemy boss fights a lot better, but these are not the worst multi-enemy in our boss fight in Dark Souls 2. We will get to them when we get to them. So here we have the Lost Sinner. So the Lost Sinner is one of the bosses that we need to defeat, who carries one of the Great Souls. So it's very similar to Dark Souls 1, where we have to collect the 4 Great Souls. So these are the same souls, or Great Souls, that are held by the people, the bosses that we need to kill in order to finish Dark Souls 1. So This is the last sinner here. She possesses the soul of the Witch of Izalith. We find her chained up in a dark, dark room. However, what's cool about her boss fight, and this is something that people can completely miss, is when you walk up to her fog door, before you actually enter the fog door, there are two walkways to either side of you, to your left or to your right. If you go to these walkways and you equip a torch, you are able to light the oil in the torch, which sends flames into the boss arena. If you do this on both sides, it goes from fighting her in pitch black to fighting her in light, which makes things a lot easier. The reason we know she has the soul of the Witch of Izalith is we see one of the chaos bugs crawling in and out of her eyes, which is quite gross. But she's extremely dangerous and extremely fast, but definitely the best boss fight so far. Here is the Belfry Gargoyle. Now, I had literally just mentioned that the Ruined Sentinels are not the worst multi-boss fight in Dark Souls 2. The Gargoyles are the worst multi-boss fight in Dark Souls 2. So we fought Belfry Gargoyles in Dark Souls 1 as a boss. We fought one, and then another one drops down with half health, and we fight them. And it's a difficult fight, but it's a fun and it's a fair fight. These guys, however, you walk into the arena, which is about a third of the size of the arena that you fight the Gargoyles in Dark Souls 1 in. And instead of having one to start with, and then another one jumps it down once you get the first one to half health, no, they all just jump down at once, and there's about 4 or 5 of them. So it is hell trying to kill these guys. If you have some kind of ranged ability, like I always play a strength faith character, so I always end up using lightning bolts to destroy these guys, just because it's easier and I can keep my distance. Because even if you have like a strong weapon, if you go in and you might have an opportunity to kill one of them or to hit one of them, but one of his friends is going to come up behind you, and while he hits you, another 2 of them are going to come up and stun knock you again. So it is quite frustrating. So this is the Skeleton Lord. In this boss fight, we have 3 Skeleton Lords, so we have to defeat all 3 of them, as well as a few of just standard skeleton enemies. So these guys are super weak, especially if you have powerful weapons or spells. So if you have like a great sword or a good strength weapon, or a good faith spell, if you've leveled them up, it's really good. Again, these guys are something that I use lightning on, and then I use my greatsword or whatever. I can't remember my main weapon in Dark Souls 2. I actually need to download and replay Dark Souls 2 soon, to defeat the cannon fodder skeletons. So it's a bit of an anticlimactic fight. It's a cool idea. It's almost like a precursor to the Shadows of Yharnam fight in Bloodborne, but these guys are not nearly as tough. They are absolute pushovers, but they do look cool, so at least that counts for something. So here we have the Executioner's Chariot. It's an optional fight or an optional boss that we can find in the Huntsman's Copse. We defeat him. Again, it's almost like a gimmick fight. You have to run around the arena until run around the arena and then continuously take cover from his spikes, and eventually you get to a switch a lever which you pull, which then trips his horse the next time he comes around, and then once he's on the ground, you're able to just finish him off. He doesn't even attack. I think one of his horses still attacks if you get close enough, but that's really it. What is worth it though for killing this guy is you're able to join a covenant called the Brotherhood of Blood. I believe it's the Brotherhood of Blood. If not, it's the Something of Blood. But it is essentially a PvP covenant where you can both invade and participate in duels in the arenas. That is one cool thing about Dark Souls 2, is it had dedicated PvP arenas if you wanted to actually fight one-on-one versus invading someone. So if you like PvP in these games, which I do, they are great. So this is the Covetous Demon. We find him in the Harvest Valley in the tower. He was once a knight, and he was in love with another boss that we will come across soon. And however, but she did not love him, so he tried to win her affection by trying to best her in everything, by trying to covet as much as possible, whether that's wealth, whether that's food, or anything in between. And as a result, he got transformed into this monstrosity here. You can see him a bit better here. What's cool is there's here and here, there's two pictures of people. So you can see the size difference between the Covetous Demon and this person here. So he's quite big. Very easy fight. Again, a lot of the bosses in this game are really easy, but he does have one move that is essentially a one-hit kill if he hits you. So very annoying if that happens. So this is Mytha, the beautiful queen. So this is the woman that the Covetous Demon was trying to make fall in love with him because he loved her. She was obsessed with becoming beautiful, to the point that she started taking poisons to try and make herself more beautiful. However, these poisons ended up turning her into this half serpent woman, which is actually very sad, because all she wanted to do is just kind of become beautiful, or become more beautiful in her eyes, because it is insinuated that beforehand she was beautiful. So both of these people, both her and the Covetous Demon, transformed into these monsters because of just wanting to impress others. So you are able to get rid of the poison in her boss fight. In her boss arena, the platform that you fight her in is very small, and the rest of the arena is covered in poison. However, you are able to get rid of the poison by burning some of the wheels, churning the poison in, making it a lot easier for us to fight her. Next up, we have the Smelter Demon. I love the Smelter Demon. I love his design. I love fighting him. He is so cool. So he is a golem that was created by the Old Iron King. I will talk more about him later, but essentially he is consumed by fire and kept alive by fire. And as such, his attacks are all fire-based, as well as extremely damaging melee attacks. We fight him once in the main story, and then we fight him a second time in the DLC, The Crown of the Old Iron King. So this is the first time we fight him, and it is so cool. Up until this point in the game, the Smelter Demon is my favorite boss fight. Here is a picture of almost like the assembly of him, which I think is really cool. It's almost like this is like like if you got a toy of the Smelter Demon, this is like how you would assemble them. That's just how I look at it. But here is a what's it called? A picture of the back of the Smelter Demon. So yeah. So next up we have the Old Iron King. So the Old Iron King is a kind of tragic story. So he had a monopoly on iron and metal work, and eventually he kept building and building and building in his kingdom. And eventually, despite all of the warnings people gave him, he completely ignored them. And despite all of the warnings, his kingdom sunk into lava. That's why when we get to this area, we find it covered in lava absolutely everywhere. So the Old Iron King is the final boss for this fight, for this area. He has the soul of Gwyn from Dark Souls 1. While he looks so cool here, his boss fight is one of the worst in the game. And I mean, really one of the worst in the game. It's like something out of Zelda. He stands waist deep in his lava. He will swing down at you really slowly. He will punch the ground and he will keep his fist there for about 10 seconds and then pull it back. And he does this, and then that's it. That's the boss fight over. So absolutely amazing boss, absolutely amazing character, incredible lore, and yet somehow they manage to botch the boss fight. So this is Scorpion Najka. So she is another boss that we find in one of the later areas. I am drawing a blank on what this area is called, sorry. But we fight her. She can inflict poison and stuff, but again, very easy to kill. We are actually able to find her boyfriend or her husband, who is a man scorpion, and we can tell him what she has become, and he agrees to help us fight her. So we can summon him, which is actually really cool, being able to summon a half man, half scorpion to help us in the fight. What's cool about the area where we fight her, or the area before we fight her, is there is an NPC called Ornifex, and she is one of those half crow type enemies that we find in the the Painted Realm of Ariamis in DS1. However, she is not hostile. And not only is she not hostile, she is our vendor for boss weapons in the game. So it is absolutely possible to miss her. I missed her on my first 3 playthroughs. I had no idea she was there. But then, yeah, she disappears and she is so difficult to find. I can't even remember where we actually ended up finding her. But she is the one who we can give boss souls to get weapons or spells or armor or stuff. So here we have the Prowling Magus. This is him here. He looks very much like a leader of a cult, and he has quite a following of a flock of people who are very weak but follow him. And then here we have the Dark Clerk. So this is kind of like his second in command. Both of these people have a cult going on where they take everything from the people who believe in it. So these guys are up to no good. And again, for whatever reason, both of these guys count as bosses. It's another 2-on-1 fight, but they both go down on like 3 hits, even with a standard weapon. With my build, by the time I reach these guys with like a +6 or +7 heavy weapon, with my strength at 40, they go down in like 1 or 2 hits. So super easy. I'm trying not to make judgments on how difficult enemies are based on my build, but more so on how they just would come to be for builds in general. So this is another boss that we find as we keep going down. This is the Rotten. We find him in the after we go down through the depths, we come through another area that is even worse. It is dark, it's underground, it's crawling with poisonous enemies, poisonous statues. There's massive four-mandible serpents that come out of the wall and try and attack you. And once we clear all them, and then someone invades us. So it's very tricky and it's a very difficult boss run. However, he is a pretty good fight. We find him trying to build statues, and he drops one of the heads and he goes into a rage, which is actually kind of sad. It's like he's trying to do something productive. So first off, this thing, I'm not going to say he or she because this is just a thing, has the soul of Nito. So I guess in the same way Nito was a body that was multiple skeletons, this is something with a body of multiple live people, all of which are still alive. So he attacks you with this massive cleaver and you take him down, and yeah, that is the end of him. Here we have the Mirror Knight. So again, we see him here with his shield, and then some concept art of him down here with his shield, his sword. I don't always wear his full armor set, but his armor set is so cool. It's not super flashy, but at the same time, it looks very intimidating. That's the kind of armor that I like in these kinds of games. So next up, we have the Demon of Song. So this is another enemy that we fight. Not super difficult. He's like kind of like a frog with a man's face. So we have to wait for his face to pop out before we can actually attack him. Next up, we have the, what's it called? Verstatt, the Royal Aegis. So Verstatt is sworn to protect King Vendrick. So here's what ends up happening. The Queen and Nashandra is essentially a demon or someone from the abyss, and she has come to this kingdom to overthrow King Vendrick and ascend the throne of want for herself. However, she needs, I believe it's Vendrick's, it's either his like his ring or his soul, or I can't remember what it is. So he goes, he runs off from the castle, followed by his sworn protector Verstatt, and essentially locks himself in a room. That's why when we find him, he's gone hollow. So when we first enter the hallway to get to the king, Verstatt is standing in our way, and he is a very dangerous foe. Really cool boss fight. His armor is incredible. I really like his helmet. He has this massive mace. This is the kind of weapon that I would always use in these games. It just looks like a strength weapon with a bit of faith. So he doesn't care what your intentions are. He doesn't care if you're helping or hurting. If you are trying to get to the king, you are going to die, and you are going to die by turning into a pancake. So eventually we do defeat him and we make our way to King Vendrick. But when we find King Vendrick, he's just walking around hollow. He's not hostile, he doesn't do anything. We can attack him, and he does not care one single bit. Next up, we have, sorry, let me move this close. So we have Vendrick. So this is the king of Drangleic. So this is him as he was a bit younger before he went hollow. So as you can see, very robust looking man, very strong looking man. His armor is so cool. I know this is the second time I've mentioned it, but he almost looks like if you've read a Song of Ice and Fire, the descriptions of the old kings in the north, that's what he reminds me of here. He just looks so cool. This is him from the back. But yeah, definitely a very intimidating man. And again, he went to war. He invaded the giants' homeland and seemingly succeeded. It's not quite sure what they actually stole from them, but they did steal something very important. So this is the Guardian Dragon. So we find the Guardian Dragon in a cage, in like a bird's cage, which is kind of cruel in my opinion. And we do have to fight and kill him to proceed. This is how we proceed up to the Dragon Castle, or the Dragon Cult area. I can't remember what the area is called. But yeah, this guy is no joke. He is a powerful, flame-breathing drake. I believe he's actually a drake, not a proper dragon. That's just my fault. I know in Dark Souls, all of these types of enemies are drakes, but to me, every time I see one, I always just say dragon, because to me, they just always remind me of dragons, despite dragons being hunted to extinction. So here we have the Ancient Dragon. So this is the dragon that we find at the very top of the castle of the dragon worshippers. So we can talk to him, and he is very kind. He's not hostile to begin with, but yeah, very cool, very interesting guy, cool to talk to, very wise. However, here's what's interesting. Do you remember how I said that the king's brother, what's his name, Aldia, was doing all kinds of experiments on people and turning them into horrific types of creatures? So it is possible for us to fight the Ancient Dragon. So we can fight him, and he is a very tough fight. He has a huge health bar. He flies up into the sky, he breathes fire and all that. However, when we defeat him, we get an item of interest. We get the soul of a giant. Not a soul of a dragon, a soul of a giant. So it makes us wonder, was he once a giant that got transformed into this dragon? And once we bring a once we have attained a dragon spirit or a dragon soul, we can return to Vendrick, and once we have that in our inventory, Vendrick instantly becomes hostile and we can fight him and defeat him. So just while we are still on Vendrick, so once you go back into his arena with a soul of a giant, he will become hostile and attack you. Once you defeat him, however, that's not the end of Vendrick for our gameplay. So later on, as you progress through the DLCs, I cannot remember which DLC it is, you will acquire an item called the Ashen Mist Heart. If you take this item and go back to where Vendrick was, you will find a pile of his clothes and armor strung against a wall. You can use the Mist Heart to interact with them and enter the past. And in the past, you will find Vendrick fully human, fully lucid, and is willing to talk to you. And he gives you some really good insights lore-wise. I can't remember what they are, but they are very, very important. Another thing is the 3 DLCs are the Sunken Crown, the Old Iron Crown, and the Ivory Crown. If you have beaten all 3 DLCs, which I would actually recommend getting all the DLCs. In my opinion, the DLCs are better than the main game. Then Vendrick will give you his crown as well. So super, super cool. Very easily missable, but I just think it's cool, and I think it just shows how good of a guy that Vendrick is. So here we have the ancient dragon that we talked about. Here's the giant lord. So this is the lord that we fight in the flashback. As you can see, he has some fancy attire, his crown, and a massive, massive sword. This is us here. So we defeat him in this flashback, and then he is sent or captured and essentially imprisoned and becomes the last giant. That's why he hates us so much. Next up, we have, sorry, I can't see what that says. So this is the Thorn Watcher. Really cool design. I believe this is a woman based on her design and body. She has a really nice sword, really nice robes, really nice helmet, really cool looking NPC design. NPCs like this are always fascinating to me, just like very elegant looking men and women in these kinds of games. The second character that we fight here is the Throne Defender. So this is another enemy that defends the throne. So he is not as devoted as what's his name? As Vestat is, but he is definitely a protector of the throne. Next up, we have Nashandra. Now, you might have heard me talk about earlier that Nashandra is the queen. And she looks quite beautiful when we see her in the game and in the concept art we've seen before. But yet, Vendrick runs away and locks himself up and willingly lets himself go hollow so she can't succeed, which makes you wonder, why would someone do that? The reason is because this is Nashandra's true form. She is a daughter of the Abyss, and she wants to take control of Lothric for herself by claiming the Throne of Want. So after we open the Throne of Want using all of the tools and items that we have acquired, she walks in and essentially thanks us because she was using us to be able to open the door to let her have access. So obviously we end up defeating her. She is actually quite difficult. At least on the first time, after about 2 or 3 times, you'll kill her, no problem. It took me about 2 times to kill her. There are options to summon various NPCs. I didn't do that, but I just think she's a really good fight, and as much as she is evil, she has a really cool design. So next up, enemy design illustrations. However, everyone, that is going to be it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your viewership so much. I want to give a shout out to my 2 Patreon members. So thank you, Slice of Life for Life, and thank you, Mary the Otaku. If you are listening to this video while trying to go to sleep or relax, this is the end of the video, so I would recommend turning it off now. Okay, so again, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. This has been Crimson, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.